for inviting me to be a speaker at your seminar. I always attend it as a listener and really enjoy it. And today it's a good opportunity for me to have a speech. Hopefully somebody else will join us. So today we actually wanted to share the experience of scaling the data labeling production using the crowdsourcing and some real use cases of how the crowdsourcing can be implemented for solving different business needs in a real industry, and which changes in both business processes and engineering culture does the switch towards crowdsourcing bring to the company. So hopefully this would be both interesting for those who are interested in the crowdsourcing in general, and maybe useful for those who are experiencing the usage of crowdsourcing in the industry. And yeah, in general, we'll be speaking about the topic, which is unfortunately for the long time has been underestimated and kind of underinvested in terms of serious research in the AI sphere. And this is the training data on which all the algorithms are trained on and validated. And a couple of words about myself. As Vanya has already said, I'm the CEO of Toloka, crowdsourcing platform, which started as an internal project within the Yandex and now turning into an independent entity serving dozens and hundreds of businesses all around the world to supply them with the data labeling on a large scale. And for the previous 10 years, I have been actually in charge for providing all the data labeling solutions for all the AI-based products of Yandex. And that's why I have managed to collect some expertise on that topic. The word Toloka itself is an ancient Slavic word, which has the origins in an ancient tradition when people gathered together in order to do some common job, which is hard to perform alone, but can easily be done when people are gathered together. And in modern world, it is a good allegory for the crowdsourcing when lots of people can, practically any person from any part of the world can register on the platform. They gather together to choose some interesting tasks from the requesters, and their cumulative efforts allow to get good and high scalable results. And Toloka offers to our requesters 4 main values. These are the scalability of the production. Hello? Everything fine? These are the scalability of the production, the significant saving of costs with the quality on par comparing to other data labeling solutions that has been verified many times on many examples, and the product diversity, because the technology and the tools and the instrument is actually very flexible and universal and can be applied to very different domains and different use cases. And this is what we actually would be talking about today. These statements are based on our long-time experience in the real industry within Yandex and also on the successful use cases of our other customers and clients. And in general, it's quite ironical, I would say, that whenever we speak about the artificial intelligence, it relies on, to a great extent, on the human efforts. Because if you look at the machine learning production pipeline, you would need human labeled data for training your models, for validating them, for controlling how they actually work in production, and for retraining the models once you obtain new data from the real world. And that's why for any AI product, actually, you constantly need to have some supply of labeled data, and the more AI product appear, the more AI products appear, the more data is required. That's why actually from the very beginning of the existence of Toloka, we have been facing the main problem of scalability, because at every moment of time, the industry required more and more and more labeled data. And at every moment of time, actually, we have been trying to solve the problem of scalability without losing the quality and without increasing the costs. And this is how Toloka has been growing since 2014, when it was launched, till the nearest days. You can see that we have finished the year 2020 with more than 4 million people, performers, we call them Talokers, those who actually actively performed on the platform and earned some money. And these are quite incredible numbers of 4 million people within 1 year. And our map of distribution of Talokers all over the world is constantly growing. And there are people from all over the world speaking majority of the most popular languages in the world. And actually the multi-regionalness of Toloka, and the fact that we have so many performers from so many countries, is a very useful and important feature of the platform. We even are launching the feature of multi-language projects, where one project can be cloned and set at the same time for different languages, because for actually many requesters, we see the necessity to launch one and the same project to be labeled, for example, at the same time in English, in Spanish, and in German. And Toloka follows these needs in our tools. And we have right now more than 40,000 active performers a day. So every day there are more than 40,000 people ready to perform the tasks, and they are able to perform the tasks on all the platforms like iOS, Android, and desktop, and their cumulative efforts produce more than 15 million labels every day. And our history is actually that we have started from being an internal infrastructure for the Yandex search, because search in an industry, historically, the search has been one of the first products that actually required human data labeling on a large scale, both at Yandex or in Google, in any search engine company. But then we have grown to become an infrastructure for the whole Yandex, because the more products appeared and all of them required some data labeling. And now we are growing to become an infrastructure for the global AI industry to serve the best supply for data labeling to all the requesters all over the world. And now let's move to actually the interesting part regarding our internal experience. First, I would like to share our history regarding the scaling data labeling and that experience. Because as I have mentioned, we have started quite long ago, and actually the first projects of human data labeling appeared at Yandex in the year 2008, because this is when the ranking algorithms in the search started to use machine learning, and hence they needed some labels to target on. And hence they needed human labeled data. And of course, in the year 2008, it was very long ago, and the data was labeled by several people on Excel sheets. And from that time, we have passed quite a long way towards those millions of performers producing millions of labels automatically on the platform. And actually, when we have started it, till the year 2015, The production of human labels at Yandex was organized in a fully managed service way. There was a team of in-house assessors, like part-time employees, who have been deeply integrated into the company and into the system, and who have been providing those data labeling. And from the year 2015, we have switched to the crowdsourcing model. And I would like to share like what the story of what happened actually within these years and with this switch. So in general, once we have, while we have been dealing with this fully managed service, we have been facing a great problem that actually the great problem of scalability, because you need to solve lots of administrative problems regarding hiring and managing those thousands of in-house assessors. And actually at one moment you realize that you do not care enough about data labeling anymore, but you only care about those administrative questions. One of the alternatives towards the complete in-house service was the outsourcing. But actually what we have seen and what we have tried it is that actually the outsource makes you lose the control over the process, and no outsourcing company would ever care as much about the data labeling as you yourself care about it. And that's why it was kind of a painful experience to trying to outsource the data labeling. In addition, it actually also is related to some management costs, but also brings you the losing of control over the whole process. And that's why in the year 2015, when we realized that we cannot continue the growth in a classical way with in-house fully managed data labeling service or with the outsourcing for external vendors, we have switched to the self-service open crowdsourcing scheme with Toloka. And what actually happened in this moment, when I look back at that period, I actually see that it was kind of a quantum leap in data labeling production. Because if we can look at, for example, the year 2013, when we've been using the in-house managed service, and 2017, right after we have moved to Toloka, you can compare the numbers in all the aspects, either in amount of tasks done, in the amount of performers involved in the process, in the amount of projects, which is similar to the amount of actually products which are consuming this data labeling. The amounts increased dramatically. But what is also important is that actually the transfer from this managed service approach towards the self-service model, when any engineer could approach the platform and set up the process by themselves, it brought us two major changes. First was administrative, because it was more cost effective and much easier scalable, as you have seen on the previous slide. But what is more important, it actually brought us a significant change in an engineering culture. And this is actually the thing that I really want to share with our listeners, because this is, I think, the most important part of that, because it gave the opportunity for the engineers to impact on every stage of AI production, starting with the very beginning, from the data gathering. Because before we have launched Toloka as a self-service platform, the attitude was like that. The part of obtaining training data was separated from the responsibility of our engineers at Yandex. And their attitude was very consumeristic. They were like saying, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have the time to deal with this boring data labeling. Just bring me the data set and I'll do something about it. And their sphere of responsibility started only after they received actually the data set. And after we have switched to Toloka, the attitude has changed, because now the whole process was under control of the engineers, and they understood that they are responsible for the data they are training on. And they started to provide a very significant impact on the whole process. And this is actually, I'm sure that this is what gave us the opportunity to try a large variety of different use cases for the application of the crowdsourcing, because within the managed service, no one manager could ever, I don't know, invent such sophisticated schemes of using the crowdsourcing as we managed to achieve when we have had lots of smart engineers trying to invent some new production pipelines for their own needs. And thus we moved to actual use cases of how the platform can be used for different cases. In general, I would cluster them into 3 big groups. They are related to gathering of content, data annotation, and some business-related decision-making tasks. So gathering of content is quite a standard task when you need, when you have no content and you actually need to generate it, train on it. For example, this is when you need to collect the activation phrases for the voice assistant. And it turns into quite a simple pipeline when one person just records the phrase, for example, "Hey, Alisa." And then there is another step of post-verification when other people are listening to this phrase. And if they approve that the phrase was spoken correctly, they accept it. If no, they reject it, and the task is sent to another performer. And it can be sent in parallel to many Talokers, and thus you receive a very fast and scalable result, like a clean data set of thousands of voice recordings within several hours or something like that. Then one of my favorite use cases is spatial crowdsourcing. When people are asked to come to some certain location offline, they see some locations on the map and they are asked to come to this location and perform some action. Most usually this is to take a photo of an object. For example, it can be a door of the organization, which sometimes is the only way to actually know whether the business is working or not, especially during the pandemic's time, when the many businesses were closed and not every business has up-to-date information on their online sites and etc. And quite often the only way to actually understand what's going on with the business is actually come there by feet and verify that. And this is the task which is actually very actively used by the map services in order to increase the accuracy of their data about the working hours of the businesses, for example. The same task can be also used by the retail in order to verify prices and goods for their goods in different shops in different regions, for example. Also, the verification of the pricing is quite a popular task, not only among the offline retail, but also among the online e-commerce sites, because quite often there is a task to monitor competitor pricing and, for example, to find the same product in a different online shop from a different vendor and verify how your prices are comparing to your competitors' pricings. The other type of tasks which we see increasing popularity are the tasks related to semantic search and the tasks related to facts extraction, for example, because this is the technology that is now on the rise, and there are many different requesters who are making such solutions, and they all require some human-powered facts extraction in order to train and validate their models. Then the other part is the classical actually task for machine learning, the different ways of data annotation, starting from audio transcription when you need to switch to transfer some voice recordings from speech to text, or some NLP related tasks like named entity recognitions, or some validation of auto translation, which is possible due to the fact that there are many different people speaking many different languages at the same time on the platform. Of course, there are cases of moderation of content, which is a very popular task right now because the amounts of content are only growing in the internet, and all of them need to be moderated. Then there are, for example, quite interesting tasks related to video labeling, for example, highlighting some specific moments in the videos or something like that. Of course, there are many tasks related to computer vision and object segmentation for different purposes, of course, including the self-driving, some medical applications, and etc. I'm sorry, I have to pause for 1 second.
In the meanwhile, I can just remind you guys that, whenever you have a question, you can jump in and ask Olga. She'll be happy to answer your questions online.
I'm very sorry, there was some technical delay on my side, but I will continue. But the main question actually, when we speak about the crowdsourcing, is how to maintain the quality on a large scale, because of course every single task which we're speaking about is quite simple and quite trivial when you need to have a small amount of such labels collected. The simplest way is to actually do it by yourself, to segment several cars on the picture or to label several objects or etc. But when we're dealing with the machine learning, we actually need not several items, but several millions of items collected. And the most untrivial and important part of actually the crowdsourcing is how to provide the stable and predictable quality when we move from labeling several entities to several millions of entities. And within all our history, we have been applying efforts to find the optimal solution here. And what we see now is that the optimal solution lays in the system of the marketplace, where there are requesters and talokers, and they both provide feedback to each other, which allows actually both sides of the marketplace to improve themselves, because quite often the problem is actually not on the side of the performers, but on the side of the requesters and on the side of the poorly created task and etc. And the main ideology of the crowdsourcing as we see it, and the main ideology of Toloka as a platform is actually that you should manage not people, but the process, and the process should be designed in such a way that it is resistant to mistakes of single performers. And that's why there are different tools and directions for quality control, starting from specific selecting of the needed performers, continuing with the smart ways of motivating them, and setting up some quality control methods on the level of your project, and finally with the techniques of smart matching between experts and tasks on the level of the whole platform. And usually whichever task we take, the ideology of the crowdsourcing pipeline lays in the decomposition of the process. For example, now I can show you the pipeline for probably one of the most difficult use cases, which is the search relevance evaluation, because the relevance evaluation is a very subjective task, which actually requires both expertise in the domain field and a high level of accuracy and paying lots of attention to details and etc. So how does it actually work in order to provide the stable and predicted quality resistant to mistakes of single performers? So at the first stage, we generate some honeypots, which are some control tasks for which we know the correct answer in advance. We classify all the tasks by their domain specifics, and we select and train some performers in order to make sure that they have learned the guidelines which they need to keep in mind. Then we automatically target the certain tasks to certain experts according to the domain of the task and the sphere of the expertise of the needed expert. And then the task is performed by several performers, and its quality is validated in accordance to several different signals, and complex skill is calculated, because usually when we speak about the complicated tasks, it is better always not to rely on one single quality control method. You should include different factors of quality control into your skill. For example, some of them can be measured directly, for example, by the honeypots or by the consistency with the others. And the others can be calculated automatically, including some additional external machine learning based calculated factors. Then the verdicts of several experts are calculated, are aggregated in accordance to the measure of reliability of every expert. And thus we get the final result. Such a pipeline, once it is built and set up, actually the main thing about it is that it can be scaled, eternally, because after you have built such a pipeline, the only variable is the amount of money you're actually willing to spend on it. If you need to increase the production 10 times, you just input 10 times more money and get 10 times more output. And you don't need to change anything in the process, because the process works regardless of the volumes and provides the stable quality regardless of how much actually amount of labels you are producing. And of course, one of the interesting things about the crowdsourcing is that this methodology is universal and can be applied not only to some trivial data labeling tasks, but also to much more high level and more complicated tasks using the crowdsourcing. And the ideology is always the same. At every time we kind of try to build kind of a pyramid where on the top you have some super high level experts, maybe some pre-selected, very reliable people who can provide you with training data with some benchmarks, honeypots, and etc. Then you have the crowd, which actually produces the 95% of all the labels. And then if applicable, you can apply some automation also, which can either be used as a part of the human in the loop or as a part of, for example, automated hints for the performers or etc. And the main components of the success here is that we need to decompose the task into as simple tasks as possible. Sometimes it is not very intuitive to understand, but actually we have seen it in every single case for all the years, that once you decompose the task into a set of simple and small tasks, you at the same time win in quality, because every single simpler task is much easier to control. You win in scalability, because when there are simple tasks, there are much more people who are ready, who are willing to take these tasks. And you are winning in price for the same reason. When there are more people willing to take your task, you can use lower prices for that. And so actually at the same time, it allows you to win in all the directions of the production. And also at every moment, we are trying to delegate every task to a lower level of this pyramid. So everything that can be automated should be automated and moved from the crowd level to the automation. Everything that can be done by the crowd instead of some super high level experts should be done by the crowd. Everything that can be done not by a high level engineering manager, but by some experts should be done by some experts, and etc. For example, this approach allows us to build a super sophisticated pipelines, for example, even the generation of the text, when we have also a decomposed pipeline, when we have many performers, each of whom is writing a short part of a text, and then there is a pipeline for quality verification, and every part of this text is reviewed and verified by other performers, and then all the texts are gathered together, and it is being voted for the best text, and then they are merged together to result in some big piece of text. And these are kind of examples which are really used in production, for example, for writing the ads and creating ad campaigns, or for example, for writing some descriptions of the goods on the e-commerce sites, or descriptions of the films on some movie platforms, and etc. And the whole ideology that we are following is that actually any task you take related to human labeling or human production of such data on a large scale is never a people management task. It's always a purely engineering task. When we have millions of people, each of whom applies minimal and irregular efforts, and we deal with this big crowd and with their collective wisdom as a specific computing cluster, and we build automated pipelines on the base of this computing cluster using our API. And that's why also we invest a lot into making our API as rich as possible. We have the API and the Python library, which enables you to actually integrate the data labeling processes inside your machine learning production processes to achieve this effect that I have been mentioning in the beginning, that data labeling is not something aside of the machine learning production. It is an integral part of the machine learning production and should be integrated flawlessly into that process. And finally, by the end of my talk, I would like to emphasize and say once again, thanks for the team of the crowd science, how we call it, and Ivan and Dmitry who are organizing these brilliant seminars every 2 weeks. They are leading what we call the Crowd Science Initiative. This is our initiative in emphasizing the importance of the data labeling as a part of the whole machine learning process, and importance for every machine learning specialist to understand that the expertise in data labeling, the expertise in how to build the data labeling automated processes is actually a core expertise that you would not want to outsource, but you need to keep it inside your team and invest into education of your engineers towards this knowledge. And that's why we are organizing scientific seminars as this one and workshops on leading conferences. The next workshop will take place at the Very Large Database Conference this summer, if I'm not mistaken. We will soon announce that we are launching a very interesting contest on aggregation of raw labels in the crowdsourcing. And we will be launching our crowd science portal where hopefully we will collect some interesting, relevant research and opinions of the leaders of the thoughts in this area, and etc. So if you are interested in this topic, it would be great to keep in touch. We would be eager to invite you to our crowd science initiative events. So let's keep in touch on that. Thank you so much. I think that's all that I wanted to tell you. If there are any questions or something, I would be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Olga. Very interesting talk, and I enjoyed. I learned a lot of new things. I have one question about Tolokers, and we've spent a lot of time working on internal and external services. So maybe you can share some insights of what motivates people to come. And I guess, of course, money is a strong motivation, but do you have an understanding of what else is valuable?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we actually in Toloka blog, there was recently an article about that. So you can find later more details on that if you're interested in the topic. In general, there was a huge questionnaire which was actually sent to 500,000 of people. I was shocked by the amounts. This is really impressive, and we double checked it several times to make sure that this is really 500,000 people participated in our survey, answering among other questions, answering about their motivation and etc. And for the majority of the Talokers, this is the source of additional income. And what is important is at the same time that this is still some income. So this is important for them. But at the same time, this is additional and not something that takes lots of efforts from them. This is actually the answer to the question how we managed to invite so many people. This is because we ask so few from them. In general, the only strong requirement to a Taloker is being human, and all the other is actually whichever language the person speaks, whichever expertise he is expert in, whichever different things we will, because there are so many different tasks, there would be suitable tasks for any person. So because this is the system which allows you to come and go, to spend as much time or as few time as you can, it allows us also to invite people who are, for whom the first motivation is not money, but actually some field of interest. Because when, for example, myself, I'm not very interested in earning money on Toloka, but there are really tasks that are very interesting for me just to perform because they are interesting. So, and I come to the platform due to the motivation of the interest. And there are also, I would never do that if I was forced, for example, to come and to perform tasks every day or something like that. So this is the second form of motivation.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, and I'll definitely check out the article. It should be yeah, interesting. And I don't know, do people have questions? And yeah, I mean, you can ask them in chat or jump in. But I can ask one more question. And yeah, so Toloka seems to be, and in general, crowdsourcing seems to be like a way for business to add value, right? But then if you think about like some nonprofit initiatives or projects, right, it seems to be, you know, people like to volunteer, right? And there are volunteers in many, many different fields. And here it seems that kind of crowdsourcing project can be used for some kind of volunteering stuff. For example, like, you know, going through some archives or, you know, translating something. And do you know if there like any initiatives like this, or if, you know, how to maybe bring such folks to the platform?
Yeah, that's actually also an interesting question. In general, Toloka has always been focusing on the industrial use of the crowdsourcing. And what is important for the industry is to have the predictable production. So if you're committed to produce 1 million labels a day, so please, you must produce them as a system. And this is the way where like paid crowdsourcing works well, because there is a very transparent motivation tool for the people to motivate them by paying money. And purely volunteering crowdsourcing with such setup does not work very well. There are very interesting volunteering projects, like there are NASA's projects when people look at the photos of the space and find some objects there, and etc. These are brilliant and very interesting cases. What is wrong with them, I would say, from the industrial point of view, is that first, you cannot guarantee the stable production, and second, often these are very, very narrow cases. So you would never have those 600 different types of projects every day as we have on Toloka, only based on the volunteering project. So that's why I would say the paid crowdsourcing operates on much a larger scale. But at the same time, such projects which can allow us to attract more experts in different fields are also very interesting for Toloka, and we are right now experimenting. We have one of our experiments we held with the foundation of Leo Tolstoy and with their linguistics and philological society. It's quite an interesting use case because the Leo Tolstoy was kind of an interesting person. First of all, he has lived a really long life, like 90 years or something like that. And during his life, he managed to contact practically any significant person in the world who has lived at the same time as Tolstoy did. So he had communications with Dickens, with Flaubert, with, I don't know, everybody, with American presidents and etc. And he left a huge 90 books of those letters and something. And it's quite interesting that since the time those letters have been published, no one actually analyzed them seriously because it is very time consuming and etc. And it's really an interesting project. I'm into it now. The work on that started in the years like 1930s. So in 1935, the first, now we would call it instruction for performers was written, like how to find links and bridges between different people mentioned in the letters of Tolstoy. So they have started in this 1935, but they never finished it because it is an impossible amount of work. And now we have found these initiatives, and we have launched such an experiment right now on Toloka, and it actually shows good results because it allows to quite easily to annotate large amounts of data, and now we are discussing of how we can move it more, how we can popularize it to attract more people who are interested in this topic. This is a very narrow topic. There are, I would say, really few people in the world who are really interested in that. But our tools and the crowdsourcing approach may allow them to like contribute in such a task. And we're actually looking for some similar use cases. So you're very welcome if you have any ideas on that.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. And I remember his handwriting is terrible. So if these letters were written by him, it's a challenging problem.
No, luckily they are already like typed.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, typed but not analyzed by the content.
Yeah. Yeah, that's answers my question. And yeah, that's great that such initiatives exist. Hopefully there will be more of them. But yeah, thanks a lot. And I don't know if it seems that no more questions are here, and people can, I guess, ask them offline and contact me if they have some questions or.
Yeah, of course, I would be happy to answer later if we have them.
Yeah, and thanks, Olga, for coming and for a very
Thank
interesting and insightful talk. And yeah, bye bye then.
Okay, thank you all for coming. Bye bye.